We've all heard of the Nifty 50, but what about a naughty 40? Today we're looking at the TTArtisan's 40mm f2. Let's get into it. So we're all familiar with the Nifty 50. The 50mm has long been regarded as the go-to standard lens for giving us the same optical field of view as our eyes. There are some that say though that that's not entirely true. Some say that it's actually around 43mm, which makes this 40mm lens a little closer to the field of view of an eye than a Nifty 50. Now 40mm is a really interesting focal length. It really forces you to think about your photography. Traditionally, wide angles start at around 35 and standard starts at 50. So having a lens that sits between those two might seem odd at first of all, but it does make you think a little bit outside of the box. And being a prime, it also forces you into that fixed lens creativity as well, where you've got to move forward or move back to get those images. You can't simply rack a zoom in and zoom out. You've got to use your feet, get up, get down, get left, get right, try and work those shots. Also, being a relatively fast but not super fast prime, it's extraordinarily compact. It really is tiny on this camera. And that makes it a real bonus for walking around and shooting. Now, if you saw my video a little while ago about going back to the Fuji with the Fuji Xe3 and the 23mm, well, that's a 35mm equivalent f2, and it's a tiny, tiny lens on a tiny camera. This is a tiny lens on a relatively big camera, but it does make it a lot easier to walk around with and use as a street-style camera. So today we're down in Newcastle on the banks of the River Tyne. We've got the magnificent bridges, the high level bridge. I'm on the swing bridge and we've got the beautiful Tyne bridge still undergoing refurbishment at the moment. And I'm just having a little wander around this local area with this little lens and seeing what I can capture. We're going to have a look at its sharpness. We're going to have a look at how fast it focuses. We're going to have a look at where diffraction might kick in. A little bit difficult today because I didn't bring a tripod, so we're not necessarily going to be particularly scientific about that, but we're going to have a look at sharpness through the apertures and stuff like that. So it's an absolutely gorgeous morning and I'm going to get into it. So let's talk a little bit about this lens. Now, A few months ago, I did a video where I talked about the price of cameras and how expensive they've got. And I included in that the manufacturers' lenses, Canon, Nikon, Sony. They're all pumping out really nice lenses, but they're ridiculously expensive. One of the caveats I mentioned in that video was the fact that there are a lot of new third-party lens manufacturers that are actually putting out lenses at reasonable prices. And this is one such lens. Now, at the moment, I think the retail price is around about $170, $180 on the TTArtisan's website. That is extraordinarily cheap for a lens which, I'll be honest, is actually very good quality in terms of build. We'll have a look at the image quality a little bit later when we get back to the studio, but it feels sturdy. Yes, the ring is plastic and possibly there are plastic parts around it. Obviously the lens hood is plastic as well, but there does feel to be some metal parts in it. The actual bayonet mount is metal rather than plastic that you find in some very cheap lenses. A proper aperture ring, and if you listen, I don't know if you can pick that up. I'll put it close to the microphone. It's got a nice click to it and it feels solid. When you move the ring into place, it actually feels like it locks into place, and then you have to use a little bit of force to get it across to the next one. If you want to use the aperture rather than the front dial, all you do is just spin the aperture and it actually shows you the aperture changing in the camera. If you want to put it onto automatic again, you've got a little automatic setting there, and that'll go around there and you're back in auto mode. You can still control the aperture from here, I believe. Yes, you can. And you can also use it in the program modes, aperture priority, shutter priority, program, etc. Now, if I'm honest, this lens actually feels too small on this camera. That's not a criticism as such, it just feels small on such a big camera. I think this would work absolutely brilliant on a sort of mid-size Fuji camera. It would be absolutely beautiful. But walking around today, I had no issues in using it. It felt light, it felt very comfortable to actually work with. It's not badly balanced in any way. The camera still feels good in the hand. It's just such a small lens. Now, we're in an age where pancake lenses are very much a thing, so smaller lenses are good things. So I'm really intrigued to see what the image quality is going to be like from this tiny little lens. Now, as I said, 40mm is an odd kind of focal length, but it's not that much different from 50, and it's still that sort of very close to that perspective of your eye. And one of the things where those sort of lenses really excel is doing panoramic photos. Back up on the bridge there, I tried a few different shots panoramic. In the vertical format, you get less distortion with lenses of this focal length, and just overlapping by about a third. Handheld, we'll stitch those together when we get back to the studio and have a look at those as well. Another really cool feature about this, and I've talked about this before, is obviously you can upgrade firmware on lenses these days, but it kind of bugs me that you have USB-C sockets on lenses. This one doesn't, but it can be updated. And the reason it can be updated is because TTArtisans have actually built the USB-C into the end lens cap, the one that sits on the back part of the lens. Now, I haven't got it with me at the moment. I'll show you that back in the studio, but it's a really cool way of upgrading your firmware without having to build that socket into the camera and hence take more space. Now, of course, there's a few things that are missing from a budget small lens like this. Obviously, no image stabilisation. This lens is for Sony cameras, and I think other mounts as well, but all Sony cameras of the last few years all have in-body stabilisation. And because it's a relatively wide focal length, you don't really need that image stabilisation built into the lens as well as the camera. The other thing that's missing is an autofocus manual focus button. Some lenses have them, some lenses don't. Some cameras have them, and some cameras don't. The Sony doesn't have one. So the fact that I don't have a physical button on the camera and a physical button on the lens to switch between manual and autofocus could be a bit of an issue, but you can quite easily set a button, and I have done on the camera body, to change between autofocus and manual focus. So not a huge issue, but something to be aware of, and something that's not unexpected in a relatively budget lens. Another factor to factor in is the maximum aperture in this is 16, not f22. So if you're looking for your really deep depth of field at f22, you're not going to be able to get down to that. But of course, you're still going to get diffraction at 11 and above on a full frame camera anyway. So it swings and roundabouts as to whether that's actually an issue or not. So it's an absolutely glorious morning down here on the River Tyne, as you can probably see. I'm getting cold. I'm going to go and do a few more photographs and enjoy this lens a little bit longer, see what I can get with it. Then I'm going to head back to the studio. We'll pop them into Lightroom this time when we get back to the studio, and because I want to do a panoramic stitching of some of these panoramas that I was doing up here, and we'll have a look at those in the studio. So I'm going to head back to the studio, do a few more shots first, and I'll see you later. So welcome back to the studio. I had a real fun time walking around the bridges of Newcastle yesterday with the TTArtisan's 40mm lens. Now TTArtisans have provided this lens to me for free. However, it's a review. They haven't asked me to say positive things about it. They haven't asked me to send them the video before it's finished. This is my honest opinion of this lens with no outside interference on the process. Now, if you were interested in buying this lens, I do have an affiliate link below. I will get a small commission on any sales made through that affiliate code, which goes to help me producing more videos like this. So let's get into Lightroom and have a little bit of a dig around at the quality of this lens and have a look at the sharpness and just the usability of the lens itself. Let's get into Lightroom. So these are the images in Lightroom. Now you might have seen some of them already in the little medley of images that I showed whilst I was out on location. Now the first thing I actually want to have a look at is the image sharpness across the f-stops here. And I've got several images. We're going to open up this one first of all. This is at f2. Now if I zoom in on the center, that's at 200%. You can see that's pretty sharp in the center. However, if I move out to the edges here, you can see at the extreme edges, we're starting to lose some of that focus. And if I come down here, a little bit dark here, let's come up into the corners. You can see the trees are not quite sharp. That's kind of to be expected at f2 on any lens really, let alone a relatively inexpensive lens. If we come back to full screen here, fit the image. One other thing I want to point out that is quite prominent at the moment, you'll see it on some of the other images, is the vignetting that this lens has at the moment. At the moment, and I don't know if this is going to change, there is no lens profile for Lightroom, so it can't automatically take out the vignetting. However, if you assign it another lens, similar sort of lens, a 35mm or 50mm from a different manufacturer, you can use the vignetting tool manually to get rid of that vignetting. You'll see this a bit more prominently in some of the other images. However, let's come to the next image, and this one was taken at f8. Now, if I zoom into the corners here, you can see there's a significant improvement in the edge sharpness in the corners here. And that looks pretty sharp all the way to the edge. There's a little bit of lack of sharpness in the brickwork up here, but overall, it's a really, really nice sharp image. If I bring it to the middle again, and we can have a look here, you can almost read the small print there, but you can certainly read in an emergency there. And this is at 200%. If we fit that to the screen, you'll see just how small that text is. Now this is a 61 megapixel sensor, so this lens is actually resolving quite well on a 61 megapixel. Okay, let's go to the next one, which I think is f11. And again, we'll come out to the corners here at 200%, and you can see that's pretty decent. There's a little bit of softness, but overall it's pretty sharp. Coming back to the middle, again, nice and sharp, but I think we're possibly just beginning to get the effects of diffraction here at f11. This is handheld, as I said, on the location, so you can't completely judge it, but there is a slight softness there. Let's just, for argument's sake, have a look at it at maximum aperture, which, as I mentioned, is f16, not f22. We come down here. There's still a little bit of softness, which is probably diffraction and to be expected. Out on the edges here, it actually looks really good. So as I said, there's actually no profile for this lens yet. And if we come to this image here, you can see quite clearly we do have vignetting in the corners. This was shot at f8. I did have the lens hood on, but it does demonstrate two things. First of all, we do have some vignetting, but secondly, we're shooting into the light and into a sort of rising sun. Although the sun's not in the image, it has actually controlled the lens flare really, really well. There's no evidence of lens flare in the image at all. If I take this over to the develop module, and we'll come down to the profiles, I've already pre-selected here. I'm using the Samsung 35mm f1.4 profile, and that allows me to change the vignetting. So by sliding this controller here, I can actually get rid of that vignetting from the edges of this image. Now I'm hoping that TTArtisans will actually bring out a lens profile for this. If they do, that would be absolutely fantastic. But if they don't, you can still manually get rid of this vignetting. So coming back over to the library, let's come out. Just want to have a look at panoramic shot that I did here. Now obviously you do get curvature because I am so close to this bridge. However, using this 40mm upright, I've been able to get the whole of the Tyne bridge in by using a 5-image panoramic stitched together here in Lightroom. And I've used the distortion controls to reduce the distortion a certain amount. I'm never going to get rid of that distortion. However, to get this shot in a single shot, you would need to use a fairly ultra wide lens, and that distortion would be significantly more. So 40mm as a lens for panoramic is actually a really, really good focal length. And as you can see, if you look in the distance, all that distortion of the bridge is not showing up anywhere as near as much in the background there. Another thing to look out for is chromatic aberration, and if we go back to one of these shots shot directly into the light and zoom in, it is actually pretty well controlled. You can see there is a little bit of perhaps magenta green, perhaps red cyan there, but it's very, very minimal. The chromatic aberration, considering we don't have a lens profile for this, is actually looking pretty decent. And of course we can use the manual controls to remove further chromatic aberration from that image. So as you can see, it's a very, very interesting lens. It's not perfect, and lenses at that price aren't, but they give a certain character to the image quality. It's a little soft on the edges at f2. By f8, that softness has gone. The vignetting may be a problem for some, but again, there is a workaround for that, and it's possible that TTArtisans will in the future put out a lens profile for Lightroom. I found it a fantastically fun little lens to walk around. It challenged me. My mindset is 50mm or 35mm or 24mm. Going to 40mm was really quite a bit of a challenge. It was a little bit too wide to do sort of close-up detail shots, but it was a little bit too close to be an all-encompassing lens, so it made you think about what you were shooting. I found it a challenge, but I also found it fun creatively. Now, as I mentioned, I do have an affiliate link for the TTArtisans in my description below. And if you enjoy my photography and you want to see more tips and tutorials from me, go to my website, rotography.com, and sign up for the newsletter there. And I will send you a free cheat sheet on the blue hour. The blue hour is one of my favorite times of day, and you may have seen quite a few of my images from the blue hour. So you can get my guide to the blue hour if you go over to my website and sign up for my newsletter. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. I love shooting with that lens. It's certainly one that I'm going to put on the camera a few more times, perhaps on an upcoming trip to the Highlands of Scotland that I'm really looking forward to. If you've enjoyed the video, a thumbs up would be fantastic. A subscription would be even better. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one.